Throughout the existence of tales and fantasy, magic has been one of the core factors in larger than life storytelling. This is no different throughout majority of JRPGs. There are nearly countless examples of where magic affects the setting, and to those attuned within the world stream of magic are able to wield and manipulate it for good and evil. Spells that can invoke harm to its enemies in singular or mass form, and others that nurture health and maintain life. Rituals that affect time and balance, and others that break the world as they knew it. Magic is what spotlights some of the most memorable and influential characters in JRPGs, and is one of the most important factors to get right when emulating it in a TTRPG that so many in the past have failed to do. But Fabula Ultima, dare I say, has enchanted their player base when it comes to their magic system, as it's one of my favorite implementations in the core rulebook. As when you make a character, you get the benefit of multiclassing, as that's part of the system, to really flavor and flair the what your character's theme and how they present themselves get to be, and defined by their magic disciplines. But also, combat is fast, free flowing, and you're very impactful and powerful early on without having to be bogged down for level after level before you feel like you're having any type of effect offensively or defensively. But that's not to say as you level up, you do not grow in power. Because as you do level, your mind point pool grows, and as you start to expand your multiclassing to have a bigger pool, you start to have the capabilities out of combat casting larger than life and sometimes world altering spells that, for better or worse, really impact the game. That's why in this session of Fabula Ultima, we're going to be talking about magic, spells, and rituals. Now, it's been a minute since I've posted a video, and I do kind of apologize on that. I've had pretty good consistency lately, but work's been kicking my butt. And on top of that, we just came out of a long winter holiday. So there's been a lot of distractions and all that. But in my return here, I've been very excited to see that my channel is still growing, even in the minor absence of my posts. And I'm still now trying to do posts and asking questions and kind of building a forum also with this community that's continuing to grow. As I start this video today, I'm at over 250 subscribers, which, as I said, blows me away that I have even had this type of feedback and this type of engagement. So once again, as always, before I ever get started on videos, thank you for your time, thank you for your views, and thank you for your subscription. And if you're new to my channel and you're liking what you see, hit my subscribe button. It'll keep you updated, keep you notified for all the new Fabula Ultima content I'm putting out. And I'm going to be very looking forward to one of the next videos where I'm going to start going into a deep dive of how to make an NPC or a villain or a creature using the new Volume 1 Bestiary through the PDF preview I got from my Kickstarter from Fabula Ultima. So keep in view, there's a lot of awesome stuff coming back. And once again, thank you for your time. So when it comes down to magic in Fabula Ultima, it starts being described in the very get-go of the core rulebook when you start entering the world creation part. And it is underlined in the 8 pillars of creation that's supposed to be implemented in pretty much any world you create. And when it comes to that, magic in itself is this free-flowing essence that is either going internally or externally out through material reality or cosmically, whatever the case you want to build into it. But it's usually very apparent and very in front of you, as it's what imbues powerful monsters with spells. It's what can be used as certain forms of powering cities through magitech or whatever magic-imbued science you want to call it. But it's there and it's strong. So I want you to understand, when it comes to magic in this game, it is very, very in front of you. And if your ambition is to do a non-magic Fabula Ultima game, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you're going to be finding yourself a challenge and a limitation with a lot of character creation if magic simply doesn't exist. And I really think that's just going to limit the excitement and fun with your players. So keep that in mind. Magic is part of Fabula Ultima pretty much in every aspect you want to control. They talk about it in your high fantasy existence. They talk about it in the magic tech techno fantasy and magic. They talk about natural fantasy and magic. There's always some sort of existence. So it's worth noting before we go in a further deep dive. So, when it comes to defining magic in this game, you can pretty much partition it into two categories, to which there are spells and then there's rituals. And spells are pretty much the embodiment of combat. And there's times where you might be able to use them outside of it, but the focus is really to be in a conflict against whatever threat of monster you're dealing with. And they are usually either offensive or defensive, but they're super powerful and make you feel awesome from the very get go of your character creation in Fabula Ultima. And that can only grow as you level up in skills and gain new powers. However, they are very defined in their rules written scenarios. They also have limitations as far as flexibility. And when you play Fabula Ultima, when you start to get collaborative and kind of go outside the box, that's a little bit different, but it's exactly what you need for the excitement of combat flow because there's so much more in combat you can put into the game using Fabula points and whatever else. The rules as written scenario spells is very important into this game. Then we have rituals, which make a very unique injection in this game. And I think is what really speaks volumes on the collaborative narrative side of this and makes it super exciting and creative when we use these rituals. And basically, what they are a larger than life answer to big scale obstacles that might be coming at you using magic. And that is usually applied by doing a magic check versus a difficulty level based on the GM's assessment of what they're trying to do. And this is where it gets super fun and crazy because as you level up, you're going to get larger mind point pools and start realizing you can do more effective, more impactful things and on a larger scale when you have the pool to do so. And the things people can come up with to try to deal with larger threats is really fun and awesome. But it's also worth noting they are primarily dealt to be out of combat. They're not used to invoke actual damage in combat or against people. It's made for much larger scale things. And really, if you mess up in combat, you're not going to like the result if you ever tried it anyway. So, either way, it's worth noting that it's fun, but can also be punishing if not done right, especially when it comes to what you're trying to cast. Because whether it's spells or rituals, those are defined by the disciplines that you go through your classes. And we're going to check that out next. Now, there are 6 magical disciplines in the core rulebook. And of those 6, 5 of them are obtained through selecting a class. And I just want to say really quick that this is not going to be a class spotlight on those classes. Those deserve their own videos individually, and we'll get to them at some point. But I want you to also understand the affiliations of each class and the discipline that is relevant to them. But as I mentioned earlier, there are 6 disciplines in total, and outside of those 5 that are obtained by class, there's one called ritualism, which I'm going to give a little bit of a separate rundown on that away from the classes so you can see the way they affiliate, but also differentiate. So let's go a quick breakdown on the classes. So, of those classes, we have the Arcanist that uses Arcanism as their discipline. And they're basically your summoner. They use their magic by extending their soul that is anchored down by a larger group of entities, whether they're cosmic, spiritual, gods, whatever the case. And they act kind of like your eidolon and making them super powerful that they have to obtain throughout adventures in finding these entities. Then we have the Chimerist that uses Chimerism, and they're basically your blue mage, your druid, and they actually obtain their spells and their magic by using Spell Mimic, which absorbs spell casting from other monsters, which is really cool. Then we have the Elementalist that uses Elementalism, and they're your run of the mill traditional kind of wizard that uses elements like fire, earth, wind, ice, whatever the case. And they are both used for offensive and utility defensive spells. Then we have the Entropist that uses Entropism, which is a caster of time, balance, and sometimes chaos magic. They are able to do buffs, boons, and banes on others, and also absorb essences from their targets. Then finally, we have the Spiritist that uses Spiritualism, and they are more about manipulating and also supporting the souls of others. And that is where you see a lot of your healing magic, you see your light magic that exists, and that is what spiritualism and the spiritist is based around. But as I said, of the 5 classes, there's one that goes outside, and that is ritualism. And we're going to go into that right now. So, when it comes to ritualism, the discipline, this is one of the few very fine points I want to articulate a little bit further than just boasting the rules light system of Fabula Ultima, because it is important to understand the difference between this ritualism and rituals and casting rituals that come from other class inheritances. So, basically, ritualism, the discipline, is its own entity where you can only use it to cast rituals. But it doesn't give you spells like other classes. It's its own almost neutral entity of magic. And I like to say it's kind of in the field of, if you want to go to different games, detecting magic, dispelling magic. Maybe you're trying to open an arcane lock. Things like that that are not tied to a class specific set of spells or rituals, if you will. But if you want to be able to cast a ritual that is relevant to your class, for example, the Elementalist, then you have to invest one skill point into the Elementalist ritualism skill, which will then allow you to cast rituals that are affiliated with your class. So if you're like an Elementalist and you want to do something really cool, like I'm thinking of Storm from the X-Men as she starts to summon these tornadoes and big gusts of wind to disrupt a fleet of chasing ships. Stuff like that requires an investment from your class to do those specific rituals. Where ritualism, the discipline, is inherited by just selecting 4 of the classes, which is Chimerist, Elementalist, Entropist, and Spiritist. And like you would get 5 mind points or hit points from other class specifics, you gain ritualism, the discipline. So I hope that is articulated and understood, but please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Sorry about for the random transition from me talking to you directly and then going to the show out here, but I felt it'd be a little easier to show how to cast a spell in combat in using the core rulebook above my head, showing the sequence of how to do it, and then using Foundry VTT to kind of show it as well how I navigate it. But it's worth noting, whether you're using Foundry VTT, you're using Fultimator, you're using pen and paper, or some other avenue, this sequence of rules applies to every single spell when it comes to combat in Fabula Ultima. It's very simple, it's very rules light, it's just understanding the tools in the kitchen. So with that, we're going to have the rule book above my head. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up here just a little bit so we start from there. And I'm going to bring up my Foundry VTT. I'm using the backdrop of press start. There shouldn't be really any spoilers on other than just seeing these monsters for the first time. I love this style of Project FU's layout, and they went with the wonderful, cute pixel art style with the characters in it. But what we're going to focus on as the caster here is this individual, Cassandra. She has Elementalist in her, and while this spell I'm going to use in relevance to the core rulebook we see here, Ignis, she does not start with this in press start. I'm simply using Foundry to implement it in her so you can just see in correlation how it works. But we're going to focus on the core rulebook page for now. So with that, at the top with the spell label, as spoken earlier, spells can belong to the following disciplines of Chimerism, Elementalism, Entropism, and Spiritism. The remaining 2 disciplines, Arcanism and Ritualism, do not feature any spells. So each spell description below uses the format below and contains a variety of information, no matter the class. So we're going to start here. I'm going to go down, like I said, the sequence of order down below and just kind of pilot it to what it means on this chart. Starting with the name of the spell and whether it's an offensive spell. You notice this little red lightning bolt. That indicates it's a spell for offensive reasons. So we go back to spell name, Ignis, and you see right here that it's a red lightning bolt. So therefore it's an offensive spell. Then we're going to jump over to MP, which is the cost of spell in mind points. And we've talked about mind points multiple times. To cast a spell, you must have enough MP to pay its cost. Additionally, some spells allow you to spend more MP to increase the number of targets or strengthen the effect. For instance, a spell with a cost of 10 times T, which you'll see right here under the formula table, will cost you 10 mind points per target. T equals target. The final amount of mind points required to cast a spell is known as total MP cost. So we're going to just kind of embed that formula in our head for now. But if you were just to cast on one target, it would be 10 mind points. But we're going to go down below here, which says the targets, which is on the next row over here, or column. And it says the targets can be affected by the spell. That's the amount. Most spells can target a certain number of creatures, but others may affect different targets, such as weapons. But in this example of Ignis, we have up to 3 creatures. So if Cassandra was going to cast the spell Ignis, she could, like I said, cast it for 10 mind points on 1, or she can cast up to 3. And for every variable addition of a target, we're going to add 10 mind points. So if it was going to be 3, we're going to have 10 for 1, another 10 for 2 to make it 20, and then another 10 to make it 30 for 3. So she would be expending 30 mind points to hit 3 targets. Then we're going to look at other types of targets. As you see, targets like self means the caster will use the spell on themselves, obviously. Then we have, a target of special indicates that the spell functions in a unique way to describe in its text, usually affecting a variety of creatures at the end of the scene that it was cast in. So there's other things like that, like I said, self. There's also, we're going to drop down on the duration here. It's going to say it's either instantaneous, meaning that spell takes effect immediately and then dissipates, or there's seen, meaning the spell creates an ongoing effect lasting along the end of the scene that was cast in. So you'll see a lot of scene spells like buffs from a spiritist, or in not just spiritist, but they're a big buffing class. But you would also might see a spell by an entropist or an elementalist that might put a condition on 3 different individuals that will last until end of scene, or of course it's removed. So that's basically the durations. There's either instantaneous or seen in almost every case. It's very simplistic. Then we have the effects of a spell. Make sure I've got it further enough down. Yeah. The effects of the spell, often preceded by a flavorful description. This description has no mechanical relevance, but can help you understand the concept behind the spell and customize the appearance in order to fit your character. I love this because while it gives you some sort of incentive, you do not have to just say because they're an elementalist that they're casting, through their hands or a tome or whatever. Even though some spells require an arcane item to do that, you can flavor it what you want. You can make a mechanical elementalist. When it casts fire, it shoots out like a blowtorch, or sorry, a flamethrower. Stuff like that. It doesn't change the mechanical value of the spell, but it gives nice flair and flavor, and that's why I love the open-ended of this in this game. But then at the very bottom, you'll see that there is spells that require a magic check, often require, also feature an opportunity effect. If you roll a critical success on your magic check, you may spend the corresponding opportunity to trigger this effect. So we're going to pop back up here under the spell, and it says opportunity, each target hit by the spell suffers shaken. So if you roll a critical success, not only does it do the damage formula, but it also then gives everyone shaken, which is a really cool addition to the spell. But going back to the target, or the layout of the spell in its entirety, it's worth saying that understanding a magic check is no different than an accuracy check in combat. It's the same thing, and like every other check in Fabula Ultima, you're basically rolling two die in correspondence of the formula of whatever your class is. And we'll go into that here in a minute, but if I remember correctly, I'm going to hop over to Cassandra just to see. So Ignis, for using Elementalist, is actually using insight and willpower. So we're just going to use that and keep that in our brain real quick. But going back to the spell list, when you're doing a magic check, this is where we would say, okay, cast your spell. You're going to roll a magic check of insight and willpower. You would roll your insight die and a willpower die. You would take your total roll and whatever add-ons that might be, if there is any, and if, as long as it beats the difficulty level of the monster, which is usually not super high, but for this example, it's a magic check, it attacks magic defense, not physical like you would martial. If you meet or beat that difficulty level, the spell is successful in hitting. Then we go to the formula here under what the, since this is a damage spell, if you look up here under, I'm going to highlight right here, it says you, under the description, you unleash a searing barrage against your foes, conjuring flames out of thin air. Each target that is hit by this spell suffers HR, which is high roll, and plus 15 fire damage. So let's say you rolled an insight of 7 and a willpower of 8 for a total of 13. That's definitely going to be a hit in most cases. The higher the two rolls, the willpower 8 is your high roll. You're then going to apply the plus 15, which is a total of 23 fire damage. And that will apply to every single creature target you hit. You don't have to individually roll. You roll one time, and if it bypasses any of their defenses or magic defenses, it's a success. So, as you can see, despite me going into intricacy of explaining this, it's pretty free-flowing and quick once you understand. And I'm going to go ahead and just recap everything we just did in Foundry with Cassandra. So, I said I've got her little Ignis up right here. We're going to just go over this real quick one more time. It's the name. There's a little lightning bolt on here that says it's offensive. It's instantaneous, up to 3 creatures, 10 mind points times target. And then it says down here, class Elementalist, which just helps in Foundry. And then it has the opportunity, each target is hit by this suffers the shaken. As I said earlier, there is the formula of insight plus willpower, and the damage is high roll plus 15 fire. So in this, I'm going to move this out of the way. We got Cassandra here. Move this out here just a bit so you can see the target. So right now we have 3 targets on the field. Cassandra has, I'm going to move back over here. She has 50 mind points to work with. She is going to say, I'm going to cast Ignis, and I'm going to attack all 3 of these. Well, normally she won't know the difficulty level in this situation, but I'm being transparent here to show how this works. She's going to go ahead and cast Ignis. And like I said in Foundry, it's automated when you click. So I'm just going to click it and it'll roll. So that's a 13 versus, and it does the math here right here. It says 13 versus magic defense. The damage is 23 because once again, the high roll is 8 plus that 15, which is 23, which is crazy. That's the same formula I just used. Well, I use 8 as the high roll. But in this, it would be 23 fire damage as long as this accuracy of 13 beats any of the magical defenses of the monsters. So we're going to just bring these guys up real quick. I'm going to say this guy's magic defense is 10. That's a hit. We know that these are the same creatures, so that will be a hit as well. And then on this individual, it is a 7 defense. It is also going to be a hit. So she has successfully cast Ignis, and it's going to do 23 fire damage to every single one of these individuals. Go ahead and apply that here. I'm going to apply the selected total damage. So it does the 23 damage for him, and then her, I'm going to go back on Foundry and click her and spend 10 mind points 3 times. I'm sure there's a formula that can do it quicker, but you can do it 30 batches. But as you can see, I've now deducted her 30 mind points in Foundry, and while it did take a bunch of MP, it did significant damage, almost half to 2 of the first monsters and almost half to the other monster, which in one turn is pretty significant and very powerful. So you can see pretty quickly, once you understand how your spells work, they move very quickly and they're very impactful. The only thing it's worth remembering is some of these have like affinities that might have well, I picked ones down that don't, but this monster is resistant to Earth. So if it was an Earth version of the spell, it would be half the damage. If it was a vulnerability, it'd be double the damage, which would have been really impactful and almost destroyed these monsters if that was the case. So keep in mind, affinities, power injections of the amount of targeting your spells are very impactful, and they're very powerful very early. These are all level 5 characters, and I was significantly able to do some damage on the board just with the success of this one roll. Okay, since we've went ahead and went through the process of just a quick exchange in combat using the Ignis spell with Cassandra, I'm going to go over just a little bit more when it comes to the leveling up and understanding how obtaining of a new spell occurs. And I'm going to do that by, instead of using Cassandra, I'm going to actually use Blair Clarimond, the Heir of Denova, who is a multi-class of Lordmaster, Order, and Spiritist. And if you've watched my Kane Highwind Final Fantasy IV character creation, you'll be a little bit familiar with how this lays out, please watch that if you want to understand a little bit more of how Foundry works. But I'm just showing you in the same way you would look at a pen and paper or a PDF file of your character sheet. It's all about checks and balances when you level up. Right now, they start at level 5. You can see up here. And then in the classes, there is 5 levels of class that have been dispersed. There is 1 that's in Lore Master, there's 2 in Orator, and then there's 2 in Spiritist. And what you'll see here is the skills that affiliate with that. So with 1 level of Lore Master, you can see I've invested in the skill of Flash of Insight, or they innately do. So there's 1 of the skills there. Then as Orator with 2 levels, 2 skill levels of Encourage was used. And I'm not focusing on these skills. I'm just explaining why this works. Then we have Spiritist, which that's the caster. That is the Spiritism caster where we've been talking about. They have 2 skill levels in Spiritual Magic. Spiritual Magic for the Spiritist is the focus you do to get a new spell. So every time you level up in Spiritist, you can either take another skill affiliated with Spiritist, or you can invest in Spiritual Magic, and that allows you to take a new spell and put it in your spell book. It does not matter what the spell is under Spiritist. There's no level cap to that. You can pick any options of the awesome spells that each class has, as long as you have the invested time in that class. So, for example, right now, as I said, there's 2 skill levels in Spiritual Magic. If I pop over to spell, they have the spell Lux, which is, if you see here, is a lightning bolt, which means it's offensive. It's instantaneous. It's up to 3 creatures. It's 9 points to target. Per target. So this is basically the same formula as Ignis, but instead of fire, it's using light magic. And that is where working together multiple classes when dealing with monsters, they have different affinities that might be more reliable for one class versus the other. But on the second spell, they have Heal, which notice here, there's no formula because it automatically succeeds when you use it. It's instantaneous. It is up to 3 creatures, and it requires 10 mind points per target. So if people were a threat, they could cast this up to 30 points worth and heal. It says here, you invigorate your companions, soothing their pain and healing their fatigue. Each target recovers 40 hit points. This amount increases to 50 if you're level 20 or higher, or 60 HP if you're 40 or higher. So in this case, you have 3 people, maybe Blair is one of them, casting themselves. They all automatically gain 40 hit points, which is super strong early game. And as you could see, it scales up when you get into certain level variables of 20, then 40, and then so following, because there's only a cap of 50. But going back to this is where I said they are level 5. We're going to put 1 level. So I'm going to go up to them, put them at level 6. You'll notice when I do that, automatically, as we've shown in the past, some of the variables of their hit points and mana increase. I'm going to spend another level in Spiritist to make them level 3. You'll see now that the 5 of 6 is now 6 of 6. I have allocated the right amount of classes. Now I have to choose a skill. Like I said, this is not about me building the character. This is me just showing what I do as far as getting a new spell. I'm going to invest 1 more skill into Spiritual Magic. So that'll now allow me, on tops of Lux and Heal, getting a 3rd spell from the Spiritual Magic discipline, to which I will go down here, click Spiritist Rules, and you can see all kinds of spells that they have. There's Heal, there's Lux, there's Mercy, there's Reinforce. Just randomly, I'm going to, let's try something. I'm just randomly picking because I'm not going to waste time I'm not trying to min-max this character by any means. I'm going to take Mercy, and I'm just going to drag it over here, and now they have their 3rd spell. Doesn't matter, it's Foundry. You write it in your, you can type it in your PDF, write it on your character sheet, but every time you put an investment of up to your 10 levels of Spiritist, every time you take a skill level, you can then put it into Spiritual Magic and pick a spell. But there's also ways to build around it with Spiritists. There have other skills that enhance some of your spells you already have. It's worth to try to figure out how you want to build it. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about how the spells are accumulated. So just so it pique your interest, I picked the spell Mercy. We drop it down. It says you strengthen the heart of a creature against suffering and despair. Until the spell ends, if the target would be reduced to 0 hit points, they are instead left standing with exactly 1 hit point. Once this happens, the spell ends. Pretty cool spell, especially if you're worried about in a boss fight, you're not sure what's going to be released very quickly. You're at least prepared to not just have someone get dropped and go into surrender. But a lot of times there might be more beneficial spells or skills by the Spiritist. So I know I'm talking very quickly on that, but I want to articulate very quickly how easy it is to just level up, find your skill, find your spell, move forward. And this application works for the Entropist and the Elementalist as well. They all have their individual spell books, and same thing. You just invest 1 skill point into their version of magic, and then meet the number of investment points into number of spells. So simple as that. So with all of that, we are going to go into rituals now. All right, peeps, we're getting to the tail end of this as we are focusing on one of the biggest aspects of the magic system in Fabula Ultima, and that is rituals. And I'm going to kind of keep it going like I did with the rest of the spell casting, but we're going to have the core rulebook a little larger to focus on it because there is some intricacies that are important to understand. And instead of me just graphically throwing things at you, I really want this to just kind of be a nice fine-tooth comb through it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And looking at the top here with rituals, as I said earlier, this is acquired by specific classes and skills. Characters may gain the ability to use ritual magic belonging to the different disciplines. Each brand of ritual magic grants you influence over different aspects of the world. That's where I was trying to articulate earlier as far as differentiating ritualism as its own discipline and then doing rituals through the other disciplines. So we're going to go down there real quick. So of the 6 disciplines, we have Arcanism through the Arcanist, and they use a magic check of willpower versus willpower. Then we have Chimerism, which has that unique decision of either insight and willpower or might versus might and willpower, which kind of goes like the druid, maybe like it kind of does a druidic style type of thing. And then the 4 others use insight and willpower. So those are the formulas on any type of magic tech required to cast a ritual. So we're going to go ahead and break down what each ritual kind of can do. And that starts with, on the Arcanism, it says you could maybe do a ritual that would produce a magical effect based on the Arcana you have bound. Now, an Arcana is basically the Eidolon, the summon, whatever the case is with your whatever your theme calling it for the Arcanist in Fabula Ultima, whatever your game is. But basically, you can actively have one of your Arcana active. And depending on what they represent, is it an element of fire or earth, or maybe it's poison, or whatever you kind of create or find or use a template of, that's the base of it. And you would be able to do a ritual that is based around that. So it's kind of like a utility knife if you have enough Arcana to work with. But when you first start as an Arcanist, you only have one, and you have to go around the world and find these Arcanas to continue to increase your arsenal. So it may not be very there are not a lot of options to start with, but could become very strong as you level up and gain these powers. Then we have Chimerism. It says, enhance your senses, see through the eyes of an animal, quell the fury of a monster. I think this is cool because as you being a chimerist, you're working with nature, beasts, whatever the case. You might be able to do a larger ritual where if you're trying to disrupt a caravan or something, you might be able to manipulate a herd of elk or some sort of other beast of whatever nature of your world to cause a little bit of a rampage and disrupt things. It really is under your discretion. There's just a mechanical value of how impactful it's going to be. Then we have Elementalism, which are things such as being able to walk on water, shape rock, snuff out fires, cause a rainstorm, or summon a powerful cyclone. As I kind of used as an example earlier. Then we have Entropism, and remember, this is like time and chaos. And they can cause the decay of physical matter, they can twist the flow of time, and teleport creatures or items. And I would say maybe in certain aspects I might use teleportation as a ritualism, but since it's kind of rules as written as entropism, I would stick to it. So I would leave that as your flair of decision if your players try that, but I try to be a stickler. If it's pretty rules as written and apparent, go with it. Then we have ritualism. Remember, this is one of the non-class disciplines. It says extract magic from an object. Activate a soul circuit, sense the presence of magic. I use those examples earlier, like detect magic, disable a magic lock, stuff like that. That's kind of a neutral field of magic that doesn't have an affinity or a discipline in itself. Then there's spiritism, where it says sense the presence of the feelings of creatures, put someone to sleep, or embolden their heart. If you wanted to do something at a larger level, you might have like an angry mob that you try to ritually cast some sort of calmness over everything and try to make it a lot easier to negotiate the situation. There's really no limit to what you can do within the sense of your creativity, as long as it meets the mechanical values that are required. And we're about to go into that, but I'm going to go ahead and just go down a little further to explain more of what you can and cannot do using a ritual. So, the full process of casting rituals is described on the next page. Remember that ritual magic should never be able to accomplish any of the following. And this all goes to this down here. Causing direct damage, the ritual can still deal collateral damage if you open a chasm below in your enemy's feet, they are bound to some sort of messed that up. If you open a chasm below your enemy's feet, they are bound to suffer some kind of harm. When establishing collateral damage dealt by the ritual, there is a table on page 93 of how to handle that. But at no point is it to make big, magnificent damage to try to cause significant harm. Then there's inflicting or removing status effects. Then there's also causing characters to lose or gain HP, MP, inventory points, Fabula points, or Ultima points. As you can see, a lot of the mechanical values that are put into the game with magic is used through spells in the conflicts and combat. This stuff is not used in the rituals to do any of that and handle that. It's purely by solving larger problems and not just trying to make a little bit of an advantage in combat. Then you can there's no replicating mechanical benefits on an existing spell or skill. However, narrative effects such as teleportation or flight are okay, even if some skills do grant them. Then there is no generating creatures, equipment, or granting the permanent abilities. Don't dupe. Don't try to dupe or create items that you can sell later or anything like that. There's other systems, there's other skills, there's different classes that can make cool things. That's not in the heart of doing rituals. There's not to manifest things from nothing. But aside from that, as it says, most rituals are fair game, but the stronger the effect you seek, the more tragic the consequences will be if your ritual goes wrong. And how do we determine that? Well, then we go back down to the next page where we start looking at how to handle this. We start with, you describe what you want to accomplish with your ritual and declare which area of creatures you want to affect. Now, this might not always be creatures, but the game master has a final say on whether a given effect can be accomplished, as well as which ritualist discipline falls within. Then number 2, by consulting the area and potency tables below, the game master determines the ritual's total cost in mind points. Then in section 3, the ritual is cast following normal procedure of a spell, but it always requires a magic check, which must meet or exceed the difficulty level based on ritual's potencies. See below. The check will rely on attributes indicated by the ritual's discipline. If you succeed, the ritual has the desired effect. If you fail, the game master describes how its effects have twisted in a catastrophic way. Now, this is my favorite thing to wait for when my players are getting a little bit larger and they're starting to get a little froggy and creative with these disciplines. They still are only at, I want to say they're level 13 or 14 now, and their mind point pool isn't this large yet to do some of the bigger things, but they're starting to get their bearings on what they can do in maybe lesser impact type of rituals. But in this, I'm going to go 2 examples when it comes to rituals here. We're going to look at a minor potency, and then I'm going to do one of the largest in extreme. But I'm going to go ahead and go down the charts first. So we have potency of minor, medium, major, extreme. As you can see to the right, there is an MP cost for each potency. And then for each potency and MP cost, there's a difficulty level of what it is to succeed on. So in the situation here, we're going to look at minor. It says create a flash of light, block a passage, shatter a glass. That's pretty insignificant, but it's something small you might be able to do to distract something, or in that case, do something that will be enough to give you enough egress to escape, or something like that. But then we have medium, create an illusion, treat an illness, locate someone or something, sense emotions, or provide short-term energy. That's a pretty significant jump from minor to medium. Then we have major, see thoughts, influence emotions, dispel a curse, temporarily alter the weather, and provide long-term energy. Now we're starting to see impactful, long-term, almost sustainable things you might be able to do at certain points. And as you can see, every time it goes up, the mind points are going higher, as is the difficulty level. And then finally, we have extreme. Weaken a divine entity, prevent a catastrophe, cause a week-long change in a creature or location. These are significant influences and impacts in your world or game. And as you can see, the cost of it is pretty significant, and the difficulty level is, I wouldn't say impossible, but pretty close. But what you do with that is you also then take an area. But before I go into the area, we're going to go ahead and pick a ritual. As I was saying earlier, we're just going to use the ritualism discipline that isn't affiliated with a class. And as I said, we're going to just keep it simple, and it's going to be to disable a magic lock on a door. So we're going to go back to potency, where it says create a flash of light, block a passage, or shatter glass. One might argue unlocking a magical lock would be a little more potent than that. So we're going to go to the next one, medium, where it says create an illusion, treat an illness, locate someone or something, sense emotions, provide short-term energy. That right there is, it's kind of a cusp, because that seems a little larger than just dispelling a lock, but I think it's going to fall into that. So I'm going to actually say that's medium and not minor. So we're going to say it's a medium. It's going to require 30 mind points to cast. Then the difficulty level is 10. So at that moment, whoever is doing the ritualism, they must be able to do cast ritualism. And you see over here, ritualism is insight plus willpower on their magic check. Like I said, they must beat a DL10, and it's going to require 30 magic points or mind points. But before you roll, you have to consider the area. How big is the target? And we're going to go here where it says individual, which is a human-sized creature, a door, a tree, a weapon. As I said, the lock is on a door, so it's going to be individual size. So we're going to look at the MP modifier of ×1. So there's no extra cost, really. It's not going to cost anything because it's so small. So I would have to have that character roll a 10 or better. If they're successful, they dispel the magic lock and you make your way through. But what if they failed and the Fabula points didn't help and all of that? Well, what you could do is have, not only does the ritual not effectively unlock the lock, but then it creates a magical rift that alerts guards or cause some sort of trap or temple sink or something like that. Something that is going to be it's going to be detrimental, and it's going to cause some sort of escape or some alert. That's where you take something in failure and make it a narrative problem to solve. Then we're going to go ahead and go on the other side of that. And like I said, go to an extreme where I said weak a divine entity, prevent a catastrophe, cause a week-long change in a creature or location. So I'm going to use a scenario where, let's say, whatever the case, let's just say they know that a huge rupture of fire, a volcano, maybe it's just a small geyser of a volcano in a neighborhood, is somehow going to come in from some fault lines below and cause a big significant problem, and it's going to be worse if it spreads. And the elementalist says they're going to try to use a ritual to encase the area in ice and not only block the sundering, but also thaw, or not thaw, freeze and negate any lava that would come out. So I'll be like, okay, that is going to be an extreme potency at 50 mind points. It's going to be a 16 DL. It's already going to be really hard. But because it's going to be bigger than a individual target, we have to go to the area. So we're going to scroll all the way down, and we're going to probably find large, where it says a crowd, a small forest, an airship or galleon, a castle hall, a house, a giant creature. So that's still not big enough. So we're going to go to huge, where it says a fortress, a lake, a mountaintop, a village, a city block. This seems more like it. So like I said, the fault lines are going to explode in this neighborhood, the city block. So we're going to take it at ×4. So now that we have the potency level of an extreme, we now have to consider the area and the mind point modifier of ×4. 50 × 4 is 200 mind points to be able to achieve this magnificent and foundational ritual to help maybe something really bad or keep something bad from happening. So, like I said, if we take the Elementalist, we go up to the chart. Elementalism is insight willpower. They try to roll their insight willpower, and they've got to beat a 16. If they do, we'll narrate the success, what it does, how it hinders things. It keeps people from dying. It keeps people from being sick or harmed. Whatever the case, it's your narrative to create. But what if they fail? This is where when you take something so extreme, like an extreme potency, and make it so large, the conflict of failing is going to be not just bad. It's going to be almost, I wouldn't use the word apocalyptic, but very punishing to already the problem at hand. So maybe I would say, okay, they start casting this encasement of ice and neutralizing some areas that might be exposed by the fault lines opening up. But then when it fails, the ruptures are so explosive, it breaks the ice into shattering stalactites and launch beyond the neighborhood, and they start falling down and hurting people like that, caving in buildings, and then the volcanic eruption still happens. There's all of this stuff that has so much agency if you do not keep up and make sure the right things are performed. And I get excited anytime I see a ritual being put into play, and I can't wait for so many more because I'm using basic scenarios. I know there's going to be some creativity for my players once it gets to a much higher aspect and a duress threat is present. But while it is seeming daunting that you would have to deal with an extreme difficulty level of 16, what you still can do, if you look further down, is you can you can do a ritual as a check. And remember, we've talked about group checks where we have multiple people that are going to be in a group with the leader who is casting the ritual. And as I said, in any group check, you have a difficulty level of 10. So in this scenario with the Elementalist, we were going to use insight willpower. So every single person helping in this ritual has to roll insight willpower. And anyone who gets a 10 or better gives +1 to the leader who is trying to perform the ritual. Now, it's also worth remembering, if someone has a bond score with that leader, they get to apply the bond score to their modifier as well. So they start to get a really nice push with group efforts, but doesn't mean things still can't fail. And when it comes to people rolling in the group check, they cannot use Fabula points to re-roll. I believe only the leader can, not the actual group members. But that is going down to one other thing to consider when doing a ritual, because as I've said, it's really expensive, especially if you have to do something of, maybe it's not what I talked about where they knew pending doom was coming immediately and they didn't have time to react. Let's say it's something that is still extreme in a huge area, but they feel they can help protect whatever catastrophic event's about to happen. But they could go find an item to help mitigate the cost of the ritual. And it says right here, reducing the cost. It is easy to notice the MP costs of rituals can be rather high. In order to reduce the cost, spellcasters may provide especially rare or powerful ingredients. Doing so will cut the MP cost in half. Now, it also says this can only be done once per ritual, and the game master should determine the nature of the ingredient. Fighting it should also be its own adventure. If there is no time to prepare and the ritual is urgent, an item or ingredient of the GM deemed suitable can be sacrificed to allow the ritual to take place. So there is a little bit of leeway, but most of the time, I think when you're creating these scenarios, it's supposed to build an adventure to make this grand succession to occur, and you be the heroes to stop this event. So there's one more thing to go over and consider. There's rituals and conflicts, and this is where I was talking about. They do not exist to not necessarily cause damage, but they can be part of an objective ritual to help maybe, for better words, seal a gate with a big entity trying to get through while you're fighting minions, something like that. It says right here to start at on the first label. It says use the objective action to begin the ritual. Perform steps 1 and 2, the flowchart on page 119, to determining the ritual's discipline area and its potency. We've been through this. A ritual clock is immediately created with a number of sections based on the ritual's potency, and see the table below. Now this clock is part of the scene, and anyone can interact with it through the objective action. Like any use of the objection action, the game master will be the one adjudicating with what attribute should be used for the clock or for the check, as well as whether it has a fixed difficulty level or an opposed check. The caster can perform the first check to fill some of the section's clock as part of the objective actions they use to begin the ritual. Then on the fourth part, it says once the clock is filled, the character who initiated the ritual may use their action to perform step 3 of the flowchart on page 119. To do so, they will spend the appropriate mind points to perform the magic check for the ritual, whose difficulty level is determined by the ritual's potency. The outcome of the check will reveal whether the ritual is successful or its effects are twisted catastrophically. As I said, it's kind of a rinse and repeat scenario. We've seen how to cast a ritual, how it's determined. But when you look over here, this is where we look at, we have already the potency level, we have the area modifier and all that. But if you notice right here, they also added a clock. So if it was going to be a minor base, it's going to be a clock of 4, medium 6, major 6, and then an extreme clock of 8. So really, I think it's kind of the level of how cinematic, how catastrophic, how big of an importance it is to handle the ritual that is causing what's going on while in conflict or possibly in combat in that conflict. So I could go on for another hour about examples, but I feel like this video has been long enough. And when it comes to describing rituals, there is a lot you can do with your imagination. But as long as you retain what is given on these charts, it's a very easy scenario. It's a very easy equation and formula to figure out. You just need to spend a little time looking at what the potency levels are and understanding the magnitude of what's being done, and then you have fun with it. And it's simple as that. So as we come to the end of this video, I'm going to admit that this video took a little longer than I anticipated because I really wanted to invest my time to articulate and show the intricacies of spellcasting and rituals. And while there's a lot to explain, just like anything else in Fabula Ultima, a few bits of practice with it and applications, and it's very easy to understand how quick you can come to finding spells in combat, utilizing them in the best way you can, and synergize with your group. And then also sit there and think of really ridiculous, sometimes awesome, and sometimes daunting rituals that can be very effective in the narrative, whether it's to reward a task or fail in a consequence. So that being said, like anything else, if you enjoy this content, give it a like. Give me a subscribe if you're new to the channel and you've liked what you've seen. And in any other aspect, I love feedback. I love the content and comments, and I want to know more about your experiences. So until the next time, I hope you had a good day. I hope you have a good night, and I cannot wait for the next time we Fabula Ultima.